Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookish From, and we are on day number 12 of Vlogmas. So we're pretty much at the halfway point, almost, kind of, because technically I guess it would be 13, but that's a little over because it's 12.5, but whatever. I'm just gonna say that we're at the halfway point and we are doing great. I am so excited to say that we have kept this going 12 days strong. 12 days strong. By now I would have missed a day. So this is a big milestone for me, and I think that this is going to be the year that I'm actually going to complete Vlogmas, and I'm so excited about that. Okay, so as you can see from the title of this video, today we're going to be talking a little bit about underhyped books in the Booktube community. So these are a few books that I think do not get enough love. They're not talked about enough. I don't think a lot of people have actually read them, and they definitely deserve more attention. And I got the idea to do this song when I listened to the Jackson 5 song Give a Little Love. So I was thinking, give a little love. These are books within our community that need a little bit more love. So as always, with every video that we've done before, the 11 videos that have come before this one, we're going to talk a little bit about the song. There's not much to really talk about, but I still want to give you some background information. So as I said, Give a Little Love was performed by the Jackson 5. The song originally came out in 1970 and was included on the Jackson 5 Christmas album. This song has been covered by groups like The Temptations, New Edition, and has also been covered by artists like Johnny Gill, which is the version of the song that I think I am most familiar with outside of the Jackson 5. Of course, the Jackson 5 is like the most prominent one. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started and jump into the books. The first book that I have on this list is Genesis Begins Again by Alicia D. Williams. I know that quite a few people have now read this book since I've been talking about it a little bit on my channel, but I still think this is one that really doesn't get enough love. It's one that a lot of people have never heard of. It's one that a lot of people have not picked up. It doesn't get talked about, and I actually did a triple review that included this book, the finishing half, and then also a picture book, and I created this umbrella or theme in reviewing these books under colorism. So Genesis Begins Again focuses on 13-year-old Genesis, who is going through a really tough time. This book actually has quite a few triggers, especially when we're talking about alcoholism, colorism, texturism, racism, bullying. There is a weird dynamic between Genesis and her grandmother, who kind of pushes the colorism-esque agenda, for lack of a better term. And this really just explores Genesis becoming more comfortable in her skin. She is a dark-skinned black girl, and she goes through different scenarios of essentially trying to get rid of her black skin. It is probably one of the most heartbreaking books that I read this year. It is difficult to read, but it is an important book to read because there are a lot of children in the black community who feel this way, who don't feel comfortable in their own skin. So this is not only just a great novel, it is an important novel, and one that I definitely plan to reread soon. The next one that I have on this list is I Can Make This Promise by Christine Day, and this follows a young girl that is half native who is trying to learn more about her heritage. She knows that her mother was adopted by a white family, but there is no trace of where she necessarily came from. And then what ends up happening is that her and her friend end up finding these box of letters that are signed Love Edith, and they go on this journey of trying to figure out who Edith is. And then along the way she learns more about her mom and her mom's side of the family, and there are a lot of interesting aspects of this book that detail what exactly happened to Native children and how the US government played a big role in why situations happen. I don't want to give too much away, but this was such a great middle grade book. This is one that I actually did not know about until Margaret hosted her readathon that she does, which is Voltathon, and this was the group pick, and I actually was able to read this for the Voltathon. And I wish that more people knew about this book. I wish that more people read this book because it was just fascinating. I learned so much, beautifully written, and one that I will anticipate picking up again. Next, I have Dragons in a Bag by Zetta Elliott. This is one that I read recently that I know a lot of people have not read in the community. It is a middle grade fantasy book about a young black boy who is dealing with some issues at home. His mom is in the process of heading to court to fight an eviction notice, and because she can't take him to court, she drops him off at a family friend's house. Family friend is actually a that's actually stretching it, but someone that is familiar with the family, and this person ends up having some interesting magical things going on that involve dragons. I don't want to spoil it because it is a short novel, but it's so good. It is an exploration of Madagascar in some ways. There's some dimension travel that happens, which made it feel more like a portal fantasy, but it was so good. This was the second book that I read from Zetta Elliott this year, but this is definitely my favorite of the two, and one that I wish people would talk about more, because if you're looking for a middle grade fantasy that features black characters, this is definitely one to give a try, because it, like I said, it's just well done. The audiobook was really good and I thought it was great, and the second book is actually already out, so I probably will be reading that one next year. The next one that I have here is Not So Pure and Simple by Lamar Giles. I never get his last name right. This is about a young boy by the name of Dell who's had this crush on this girl named Kiera for like the longest time, but she's never single. Like never single. Then all of a sudden she ends up single, and Dell is like, oh, this is my chance to get with this girl. Like, I definitely need to get with her. And it's interesting because what he ends up having to do is he wants to volunteer with her to get closer to her, and then he finds out that he's actually joined a purity club, and he uses one of her closest friends to try to get information on her, and then in exchange he has to get questions answered about sex for the kids in the purity club. And this is a book that explores toxic masculinity, and I will forewarn you that Dell is going to be a difficult character to understand in some parts and difficult to like in some parts, and that is intentional because it is an exploration of toxic masculinity through the perspective of a male character. So as a woman reading this book, there were parts where I was like, you know, no is like a no here, and you can't have these assumptions, or you can't do this. And that was very much so done on purpose, and it took me a while to kind of grasp that it was that in combination with societal pressures, and it was a good read. And I wish that more people talk. I haven't really seen anybody talk about this book. Like, I've seen no one talk about Not So Pure and Simple, and this is definitely a great YA 2020 release, and one that I particularly did enjoy, to the point that I want to check out more of Lamar's books. But I definitely would keep that in mind going into this book, what it explores, what it's talking about, but it's good. Well worth a read. The next one that I have on this list is Girls Like Us by Randy Pink, and this is one that I think flew under the radar last year. It came out late last year, and I don't think it got as much buzz as Randy's new book is getting for 2021, but I really did enjoy Girls Like Us. It is the exploration of what it was like to grow up and live in a time where a woman did not have the right to choose. at all. I know that there are still areas in the States where there are laws in place, although they don't outright say it. They put things in place to create barriers, but this was a time in which you literally, like, there was nothing to protect women. And it follows several different perspectives, and it looks at what happens when these girls end up pregnant. This has some serious trigger warnings for incest and rape and racism and death and suicide. It's so crazy. It is crazy. It is probably one of the most intense books that I have read in terms of the topics that it deals with, because what's so interesting about this book too is that it also explores the intersection between classism and racism, and how different socioeconomic groups dealt with unplanned pregnancies. And while most of the individuals may have ended up in the same place to deal with those unplanned pregnancies, they did not have similar outcomes, and poverty played a big role in what their lives were like after they went through the process of dealing with their unplanned pregnancies. And it really does talk about the absence of choice. I've seen reviews where people are like, well, I don't get it if nobody had the right to choose and nothing changed. And that was the point, was that it wasn't supposed to create these happy scenarios. It was a book that really defined what it would have been like living in that time prior to Roe versus Wade, where women were sent away to have these kids, and you weren't given a choice of whether you wanted to have this child or not. Outcomes of these situations were not always pleasant, and Randy Pink did a great job of capturing that. I think the only criticism that I've ever had about this book is that the ending to me can be a little strange, but then not really. But I think it was a little rushed. She was trying to capture how what these women went through prior to Roe v. Wade is what some politicians are trying to push the country back into, and how we are in a state of emergency, for lack of a better term, in which women now run the risk of, once again, not being able to determine what they want to do with their bodies. So Girls Like Us definitely is an underrated book, one that has completely flown under the radar, and I'm hoping that with more buzz with this new one that she has coming out in 2021, that more people are able to pick up on stuff that she's already done. Next, I have Parachutes by Kelly Yang, and this is one that I actually just recently finished, and it is one that I am going to be talking about a little bit more in detail in my December wrap up, so you're getting a sneak peek now. And this follows two Asian teens as they navigate being at a boarding school, but it's so much more than that. And the title is in reference to Asian students who get sent overseas to attend these boarding schools while their wealthy parents remain at home. And one of our main characters is considered a parachute, the other is not. This book tackles some really, really difficult topics, and the cover is not the thing to go by. This looks at specifically predatory behavior from an adult and predatory behavior from a student that's the same age as them. It has trigger warnings for racism, for sexual assault, and for rape. And I think that people misconstrue this one and think that it's just going to be drama, and it's not. I never expect that with Kelly Yang, because she always hits tough topics, and I think that this book in particular was very, very personal to her for a lot of different reasons, which I didn't even realize until I read the author's note of this book. But it is, Whew, this was a difficult one to read. This was a difficult one for even me to digest, and I don't want to go into too many details about the book because I want to kind of save that for my wrap up. But it starts off simply with the two characters kind of navigating their spaces, where you have one character that is on a debate team, another that is from China and dealing with infidelity between her parents and getting sent to America to be able to go to an Ivy League school and kind of adjusting to her new space. And that's how the two girls meet. They actually end up living in the same household, and it talks a little bit about being Asian and navigating predominantly white spaces. It's a lot, y'all. This book was a lot. I found myself in moments not being able to digest the book at all. Like, I had to do it in parts because it was just so gut-wrenching to just read this book. But this is one that I literally have not seen a lot of people pick up, read, talk about. I do say take this in with a great amount of caution in terms of the trigger warnings, and be mindful of how it may impact you, because I don't think I realized how much it was going to impact me, and it literally like took my breath away in some parts. So great book. One that I did end up giving 5 stars to, and I think right now, for it to have been released in May, I believe, of this year, it has not gotten the buzz that it deserves in the least bit. The next one that I have on this list is Under the Udala Trees, and it was written by Chinelo Operanta, and this focuses on a young girl growing up in Nigeria right around the time that a civil war breaks out, and she ends up having this experience and falling in love with another girl. And this is probably one of the most heartbreaking books that I read a few years ago, because it is an exploration of the LGBT community in Nigeria and how difficult it is. And this book is just powerful in itself. It looks at a mother-daughter dynamic. It looks at a country that's at war with itself, and a country that is at war with its LGBT community. And we really are following our main character as she tries to subdue her identity, because it's not something that's accepted within her country and her community, and how difficult it is for her to navigate and try to live a life that is perceived as being the best lifestyle by other people when she's not happy. And it was sad. This was a sad one, but a very good one. I have not seen a lot of people talk about this one at all either. I know that it's probably been read by quite a few people, but it's one that I haven't necessarily seen talked about within the community at all. And I wish it was more, because the power behind this book is just, I mean, phenomenal. And it's been a while since I've read it, so it's probably one too that I do need to reread at some point. But my goodness gracious, y'all, it was such a dynamic book, such a well-written, such a powerful and heart-wrenching book, and such an insight to the global perspective of what it means to identify as LGBTQIA+, and how it varies from country to country, and that sometimes it makes you realize the luxury that you have in being able to be out in your community, whereas some people, by the laws of their country, they cannot. Not just having to worry about your family, but being persecuted, jailed, and killed for your own identity. So love this one. If you haven't read it, I know that it probably will end up being a difficult read, but it is an important read. Next, I have Wonder Woman Tempest Toss, and this is by Lori Halls Anderson. This one is what DC has been doing in terms of their adaptations So they have been creating a line that specifically focuses on middle grade readers, and then a line that focuses specifically on YA readers. This is a reimagining of Wonder Woman that I have never seen done before. I think this was one of the better ones that I've seen DC do, and it really looks at Wonder Woman in different issues that are happening globally, like racism, food scarcity. There's even conversations about human trafficking, and to combine one of the most well-known and most well-recognized characters in the DC universe with such important social justice issues was well done. And I know that this does not get talked about, because just in the community in general, we don't always talk about graphic novels, comics, and manga a lot in general, and this one is a little bit on the obscure side in terms of how it has been published. I think even a lot of DC readers are probably not picking this up because it is written for a YA audience, but this was done so well, and I hope that more people do take the opportunity to pick it up. And the last one that I have on this list is This Is My America by Kim Johnson. This one came out this year. This is a book that I have talked about a lot on this channel, and I'm hoping that this is one that people actually end up reading more of, because of the fact that it's just so good, y'all. It is easily one of the best books that I read in 2020. It focuses on a young girl as she fights against time to get her father off of death row. She is writing to this organization called Innocence X, which advocates for individuals that have been wrongfully put on death row. And this is an exploration of mass incarceration, but from a different perspective. So this looks at mass incarceration in terms of how it affects families, and not necessarily just those that are actually being incarcerated. And it has kind of like a dual storyline going on. So we see the things that are going on with her father, but then her brother actually gets looped into a mystery where a white girl has been murdered, and the prime suspect is her brother. So she's not only racing against time to help her father, but she's also racing against time to help her brother. And it also looks at the generational trauma that occurs when racism is passed down from family member to family member, and how it negatively affects people within the confines of those families, and how it changes their perceptions of what they should and should not be doing in terms of advocacy. So Kim Johnson is doing wonderful things. She did a wonderful thing with this book. I think she deserves all of the praise in the world. I hope that people do not automatically align this book to The Hate U Give and Dear Martin. It does deal with conversations related to police brutality, but this one is one that's different because it's looking at thematically more so mass incarceration, and it does a hell of a job in providing that information to readers. Alright y'all, so that is it. Those are some books that I think are underhyped here in the Booktube community. Let me know in the comment box below what books you think are underhyped. If there are books here that I've talked about that you want to read, let me know in the comment box as well. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button. If you're looking for ways to support my channel, all the links will be down in the description box. If you're looking for ways to follow me on social media, all of those will be down in the description box as well. And as always, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll be back with another video tomorrow.